Imagine for a second walking into a boardroom full of Hollywood studio executives.
Oh, boy.
Right. And you're asking them for, like, close to $200 million to make a summer blockbuster.
A massive investment.
Massive. And then you look them dead in the eye and tell them that the absolute emotional core of your movie relies on a heavily armed, genetically modified raccoon
Wow.
and a giant tree that only knows how to say 3 words.
It sounds like a career-ending pitch, honestly.
I mean, in 2014, that wasn't a joke pitch at all. It was Marvel Studios' biggest, absolutely most terrifying gamble.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of a colossal financial and creative risk because, up until that point, those kinds of big investments, they required safety nets.
Right, like guaranteed hits.
Exactly. They required a globally recognized intellectual property or, a predictable origin story, maybe a standard romantic subplot just to be safe.
But then you step into the development of the 2014 film Guardians of the Galaxy, and suddenly that entire tested formula is just thrown right out the window.
Completely discarded.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you with us today.
Glad you're here.
Today we're looking at a massive, comprehensive Wikipedia article that details the plot, the grueling production, the deeply unconventional casting, and the massive reception of this film.
There's just so much to cover.
There really is. We want to uncover exactly how an incredibly obscure, highly risky comic book property somehow became a $773.3 million global phenomenon. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really grasp what happened here, I think we have to establish the core theme of this whole production.
Which is what?
It's the deliberate removal of traditional Hollywood safety nets. The success of this film, it wasn't about perfectly adapting a famous comic.
Right, because nobody really knew the comic.
Exactly. It was about embracing this bizarre, emotionally raw storytelling. The creators realized that stripping away the usual conventions, like the recognizable heroes and the earthbound settings, that's what paved the way for something entirely unprecedented.
So they have this, like, wildly unconventional approach. But, I mean, a vision is just an idea until it's actually on paper.
Very true.
To understand the sheer magnitude of this film's success, we have to look at how unlikely it was to get made at all, starting with the blueprint, the script.
The script was a journey.
Because from what our sources show, getting this story right was agonizing.
Oh, it was an uphill battle from day one. I mean, in 2009, this property wasn't on anyone's radar.
Nobody cared about it.
Right. But a writer named Nicole Perlman was enrolled in Marvel's screenwriting program, and she was offered a pile of their lesser-known properties to develop.
And the studio fully expected her to pick something that leaned toward a romantic comedy or something grounded.
Yeah, but instead, she pulls out Guardians of the Galaxy, simply because she loves science fiction and space.
I love that. And she didn't just casually dash off a quick script either. She spent years on it.
Years. Between 2009 and 2011, she wrote 10 entirely different drafts.
10 drafts. That's incredible.
And the reason it took 10 drafts is because there was just no set formula for these characters. She was drawing primarily from the 2008 comic run by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning.
Oh.
And that run featured a massive, sprawling roster of really bizarre aliens. So whittling that down to the specific team we know today, Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, and Groot, that was a massive puzzle of tone and team dynamics.
She had to find the exact right combination of oddballs.
Precisely.
But even after those 10 drafts, it still needed like a different gear to make it to the screen. So in 2012, James Gunn comes in, looks at the script, and essentially completely rewrites it.
He really did.
And his approach completely reframes the genre. He pitched his vision using a classic 1967 war film, The Dirty Dozen, as his primary reference point.
Which tells you immediately that he isn't viewing this as a standard superhero tale of, noble saviors.
Like no shining knights here.
He's looking at it as a gritty story about criminals, assassins, and misfits who are violently forced to work together just to survive.
Which is such a cool angle. And then comes this incredibly pivotal moment during the writing process. Joss Whedon, who was directing the Avengers at the time, reads an early draft of Gunn's script.
Right.
Now, in the comics, the main character, Peter Quill Star-Lord, is space royalty. His father is literally a galactic emperor.
The classic chosen one trope.
Exactly. But Whedon reads this draft and tells Gunn to drop that entire traditional comic trope. He basically says, don't make him royalty, make the story weirder.
What's fascinating here is the psychological effect of Whedon's advice.
Oh, so?
Well, By taking away Peter Quill's royal lineage, you completely strip away his inherent specialness. He is no longer a chosen one fulfilling some grand destiny.
Wait, so by making him just a regular guy who was abducted from Earth as a kid, Whedon actually forced the story to focus on his psychological trauma instead of a royal destiny.
Precisely. Leaning into the weirdness of the universe but stripping away those royal tropes, that's what made Peter Quill profoundly more grounded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It made him someone the audience could immediately relate to. A guy using humor and this sort of defensive shell of arrogance to cover up the fact that he's just a lonely orphan.
It's like finding an abandoned, odd-shaped fixer-upper house.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Think about it. If you buy a famous, historic mansion like Spider-Man or Batman, there's all this pressure to preserve the classic architecture.
Right, you can't just change Batman's origin.
No. You have to keep the original windows, you have to keep the wallpaper, because a massive fan base knows exactly what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, the expectations are huge.
But Perlman and Gunn found this obscure, weird little fixer-upper. Nobody cared about the original architecture, so they had the total freedom to remodel it however they wanted.
Exactly.
They could knock down walls, they could add a weird raccoon-shaped sunroom, and nobody at the neighborhood association was going to complain.
That creative freedom is really what allowed the script to find its unique, irreverent voice.
It really did.
But, a grounded, deeply weird script is still just paper. You can write a talking tree and a raccoon with a machine gun all day long.
Right?
But if the cast treats those elements like a joke, the audience will too. Finding actors willing to commit to that absurdity with absolute sincerity, that was the next massive hurdle.
Which brings us to a casting process that was honestly just as chaotic and unconventional as the writing.
Let's look at the leading man. At the time, Chris Pratt was entirely known for playing Andy Dwyer, this lovable, doughy sitcom goofball on Parks and Recreation.
He wasn't an action star at all.
Not even close. And he actually turned down the role of Star-Lord initially.
He said no?
Yeah. He had experienced some deeply humbling auditions for big action films like Star Trek and Avatar, and he had effectively given up on the idea of being a traditional leading action star.
The contrast there is staggering.
Yeah.
You have a massive studio tentpole, and the casting director, Sarah Finn, is pushing for the sitcom guy who doesn't even want to audition.
Right.
But when James Gunn finally agreed to meet him, something clicked. Pratt went on this incredibly strict regimen, losing 60 pounds in 6 months to physically embody the role.
It's a huge physical transformation.
But the physical transformations are almost secondary to the emotional weight the cast brought in.
Absolutely. Take Dave Bautista, who was cast as Drax the Destroyer.
He's a wrestler, right?
Yes, and he spent around 4 hours every single day in the makeup chair having these elaborate prosthetic scars applied.
4 hours every day.
Every day. And those scars replaced the simple tattoos Drax had in the comics, with each scar telling a specific story of his past.
Oh, wow.
But Bautista didn't just connect with the physically grueling nature of the role. Drax is a character driven by the horrific tragedy of losing his wife and daughter.
Right, that's his whole motivation.
And Bautista pulled from his own profound life tragedies to ground that performance. It elevated a character who could have just been a one-note, mindless brute into someone incredibly empathetic.
And then we get to the two characters that really test the limits of empathy for an audience. Groot and Rocket.
Yes, the CGI characters.
Right. Vin Diesel, a massive action star, takes on the role of a tree who only says 3 words. I am Groot.
The timing of Diesel's casting is vital here. He took this role in December of 2013, shortly after the tragic death of his close friend and co-star, Paul Walker.
Oh, I remember that.
Diesel specifically noted that playing Groot, a character who, in his words, celebrates life, was his way of re-engaging with humanity after dealing with profound death and grief.
Wow.
It was an active emotional healing process for him.
Wait, I have to pause here because I'm trying to picture the actual set.
Okay.
You have actors dealing with deep personal grief, pouring their souls into these roles. But how do you even direct a scene with a walking tree and a raccoon?
It's a logistical nightmare.
Right, because they aren't actually there. How does an actor perform a deeply emotional, tear-jerking scene to an empty space where a CGI raccoon will be added 8 months later?
Well, that is where the on-set mechanics really saved the film. James Gunn absolutely refused to leave his actors acting to tennis balls on sticks, which is, the standard industry practice.
Just looking at a green ball.
Exactly. Instead, his younger brother, Sean Gunn, served as the physical, on-set stand-in for Rocket. Sean was down on his knees, physically interacting with the cast, delivering the lines with full emotional intensity.
Oh, that makes such a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's the difference between playing tennis against a brick wall versus playing a real opponent.
That's a great analogy.
Because if you hit a ball against a wall-like acting to a green screen, it bounces back exactly the same way every time. There's no surprise. But James Gunn is a real opponent who breathes, sweats, and reacts unpredictably.
That is an excellent way to frame it. It gave actors like Zoe Saldana and Chris Pratt real human reactions to play off of. It fundamentally changed the dynamic in the room.
I can imagine.
And to return to Vin Diesel in the recording booth for a second, he brought an extreme perfectionism to those 3 words.
Did he really?
Yes. He insisted that James Gunn explain the exact meaning, the exact subtext behind every single I am Groot.
Oh, so he knew exactly what Groot was trying to say each time.
Right. He would then record those same 3 words with incredibly precise emotional inflections for every specific scene. Furthermore, he even provided the voice in multiple foreign languages for the international releases.
So it wasn't just a gimmick.
Not at all. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that the real-world grief and tragedy of these actors, Diesel's loss, Bautista's past, Pratt's drive to redefine his entire self-worth in Hollywood, all of that anchored these bizarre, fantastical aliens in authentic human emotion.
Right.
It's why a talking raccoon doesn't feel like a cartoon. He feels like a deeply broken person.
The performances supply the soul, absolutely. But I think, great emotional performances still need a believable world to exist in.
They absolutely do.
Because if the universe looks cheap, or if the CGI looks floaty and fake, the emotional weight evaporates immediately. We have to look at the staggering technical wizardry that actually brought this cosmos to life.
The sheer scale of the visual effects in this film is honestly difficult to comprehend. Our sources note that an incredible 90% of the film relies on visual effects.
90%.
Yes. We are talking about 2,150 separate VFX shots.
And yet, James Gunn didn't want a completely digital void. He insisted on practical, real-world foundations.
Right.
Like special effects designer David White actually created life-size physical busts of Rocket and Groot.
Right. They weren't used as puppets in the final shots, but they were brought on set so the crew, the cinematographer, and the visual effects team could see exactly how the real physical lighting on the set would hit their skin and fur.
It provided an undeniable physical baseline.
Exactly.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting for me. I constantly hear this complaint from cinephiles, and I get it, I really do. They say, oh, too much CGI ruins a movie.
It's a common complaint.
It is. They argue it makes everything feel weightless and fake. But I would argue that Guardians of the Galaxy proves the exact opposite.
Yes.
It proves that the problem isn't CGI itself. The problem is when CGI is used to make things look too perfect.
Yeah.
When visual effects are used to meticulously recreate the flaws and the imperfections of reality, it doesn't alienate the audience. It becomes deeply immersive. We connect with flaws because we exist in a flawed reality.
That is a crucial insight, and the visual effects company MPC applied that exact philosophy when designing Groot.
Yeah.
When they modeled his face, they specifically designed his eyes to be asymmetrical and imperfect.
Wait, really? Imperfect on purpose? Why go through that extra effort?
Because of the uncanny valley.
Oh, right.
From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, human brains are hardwired to detect anomalies in faces. In nature, perfect symmetry almost never exists.
That's true.
So when we see a face that is perfectly mathematically symmetrical, our primitive brain registers it as artificial or even diseased. It triggers a subtle feeling of revulsion.
Right, just looks wrong.
Exactly. By intentionally making Groot's eyes slightly skewed and flawed, MPC completely bypassed that psychological alarm system. They made a digital tree look biologically alive.
That is wild. And the studio frame store did something equally complex and agonizing for Rocket. Instead of using standard guide hairs, which is how you normally animate digital fur.
Could you break down how guide hairs usually work?
Sure, yeah. So normally a digital artist creates a few thick, invisible tubes on the 3D model, and the computer software just automatically generates uniform hair within those tubes.
Kind of like an automated brush.
Exactly. It looks fine for a cartoon dog. It's efficient, but it looks a bit uniform. Framestore just threw that out.
Wow.
They created 2 entirely distinct layers of fur for Rocket. They built a base layer of short, fine, downy hair for insulation, and then a secondary outer layer of longer, thicker guard hairs. They essentially mimic the actual anatomy of a real animal.
The computational power required for that is staggering. You are calculating the collision of millions of individual hairs against each other, against his clothing, reacting to wind, reacting to lighting.
It's insane.
It is computationally agonizing, but it creates that friction of reality. So, you have this weird, emotionally grounded script. You have a cast pouring real trauma into the roles. You have visual effects rooted in evolutionary psychology and the imperfections of the real world.
But there is one final crucial piece of the puzzle.
Right.
You have this vast, alien, deeply weird universe.
Yeah.
You need something to tether it directly to the audience sitting in a dark theater on Earth.
You need an anchor.
And surprisingly, the anchor wasn't a visual effect at all. It was a piece of obsolete technology, a 1980s Sony Walkman.
Music is almost always used in movies and post-production to tell the audience how to feel during a scene.
Right, after the fact.
But in Guardians, music was woven into the very DNA of the production process. The composer, Tyler Bates, actually wrote parts of the film's orchestral score before filming even began.
Which is completely backward for Hollywood.
Very unusual.
Usually the film is shot, cut together, and the composer sits in a room writing music to match the picture. But James Gunn wanted to shoot the scenes directly to the rhythm of the music.
So he played it live.
Yeah, he was playing Tyler Bates' score loudly on set, so the actors, the camera operators, everyone was moving to the exact same temporal groove.
It fundamentally changes the pacing of the performances when you do that.
It really does.
But then, of course, there's the soundtrack. Peter Quill's awesome mix fall, one.
The mixtape.
Gunn personally sifted through hundreds of 1970s Billboard hits. He was specifically looking for songs that were semi-familiar, like songs you recognize but maybe you couldn't name off the top of your head.
Right.
He eventually selected tracks like Come and Get Your Love by Redbone and Hooked on a Feeling by Blue Swede.
The cultural impact of this curation was immediate. I mean, when the first trailer dropped featuring that iconic Ooga Chaka chant from Hooked on a Feeling, sales for that song, a track from 1974, by the way, spiked by 700% overnight.
700%.
Yeah. And the movie soundtrack album made absolute history. It became the first album ever to hit #1 on the Billboard 200 chart that consisted entirely of previously released songs.
That's incredible.
No new pop singles, just a curated list of 40-year-old hits.
This raises an important question, though. Why? Why did a soundtrack of 1970s pop songs resonate so powerfully in a futuristic space, epic featuring laser battles and spaceships?
Well, think about your own life for a second. Think about that one specific song that instantly transports you back to your childhood bedroom or a road trip with your parents.
Yeah, it's visceral.
Music bypasses logic and hits your memory centers directly.
Exactly. For the audience, and more importantly for Peter Quill, those songs weren't just a stylistic gimmick. They were a vital narrative anchor.
Right.
They served as a constant, tangible cultural reference point. They were an audible reminder of his lost home on Earth and of the mother who made that tape for him before she died.
When you were watching colorful aliens fighting over an infinity stone that can destroy planets, that 70s bass line pulls you right back to Earth.
It really grounds you.
It makes the vastness, the terrifying coldness of deep space feel intimately human and nostalgic. It's the emotional heartbeat of the whole film. A Walkman carrying the memory of a dying mother, playing through the speakers of the spaceship.
It perfectly encapsulates the bizarre emotional alchemy of the entire production.
So let's sit back and look at the massive journey we've just taken through these sources.
It's been a ride.
We started with a script about obscure space criminals that took 10 drafts just to figure out the team. It was rewritten to drop the standard superhero royalty tropes and be as weird and grounded as possible.
And it was brought to life by a cast who channeled their own real-world grief, physical transformations, and personal struggles into characters that were completely absurd on the surface.
Right. It was visualized by digital artists who understood that true immersion comes from rendering physical flaws.
The asymmetrical eyes.
Yeah. And millions of computationally heavy hairs rather than glossy perfection.
And the entire sprawling, chaotic universe was tied together and anchored to the audience's hearts by a cassette tape full of 1970s pop hits.
It was a massive financial and creative risk. It completely broke the studio formula.
It really did.
And it paid off to the tune of $773 million, becoming a defining cultural moment of the decade.
It's a testament to taking a leap.
Which brings us back to you, listening right now. We spend so much time in our own careers and lives trying to perfectly replicate past successes. We see what worked for someone else, and we try to trace over those exact lines.
It's the safe route.
But this deep dive proves that safety nets can actually be a trap.
The magic happens when you stop trying to be the classic historic mansion and you embrace the fact that you are an odd-shaped fixer-upper.
Exactly.
Leaning into your own unique weirdness, your own emotional truths, and your own specific perspective is often the only way to create something truly groundbreaking.
So what does this all mean?
It means the things you think are too weird, too niche, or too personal might actually be your greatest assets if you just treat them with sincerity.
Let me leave you with this final thought today. If a rage-filled, heavily armed raccoon and a tree with a one-word vocabulary can capture the hearts of the entire globe, simply by leaning into their weirdness and carrying their emotional baggage out in the open,
Yeah.
what obscure, overlooked, or weird idea in your own life or career is just sitting there, waiting for a passionate rewrite to reach its full potential? We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.